Welcome back to the Fi-Losophy podcast. My name's Andrew. This is Tyson. We are talking about Fi, capital F-I, financial independence, and losophy, in this case, stoicism, philosophy, and how those two things go together. And if you've been with us for the last two episodes, we've actually waxed poetic about philosophy more than Fi-losophy.
A lot more.
Although I think the reason is we're setting some groundwork.
That's right.
And we want to understand the principles, because as we move forward, it's really important to say, oh, this is how I'm thinking about the finances. This is how I'm thinking about my money. And then, and this is how I think about life. And so we're unpacking a little bit of what philosophy can do for your financial thinking and mindset as you go forward. So we're definitely doing that. Also, make sure wherever you're following us or wherever you are listening to this podcast, go ahead and subscribe or follow us. We'd love, that helps us out, and we'd love to just connect with you more in that way. So go ahead and do that.
Yeah, do that. And but I want to just pile on to what you said, that we definitely are going to start talking more about money and how these ideas help you in your financial life. Although even this episode that we're about to do is going to be a little bit more philosophically oriented. And then here on out, I promise we'll discuss a lot more about money.
Don't make me promises that you're not going to keep, Tyson.
Well, we have to lay the groundwork properly.
I know you're going to keep it. Okay. Like I said, you've built a tool that allows you to track your finances. Yes. So near and dear to what we're up to here. So we talked about the dichotomy of control, or we are going to talk about the dichotomy of control in this episode.
That's right.
Which suggests to me that there are things that we are both in control of and not in control of all at the same time.
Wow. I mean, I think we're done. That was, that is actually what the dichotomy of control is.
Well, that's just what the word dichotomy means.
Well, dichotomy means two parts.
Is that it?
Dichotomy. Yeah, dichotomy.
That's just two parts?
Two parts.
So like if you were doing a recipe, it'd be like
if you had a
dichotomy of
sugar. A
dichotomous
recipe. It'd be like
dichotomy of sugar, 2 parts sugar, 1 part water, a monocotomy.
Dichotomy of sugar would be, I don't know, like carbon and whatever. So
I'm just trying to confuse you.
Yeah. So
how am I doing?
You said it. Some things you can control and some things you can't. But the Stoics take this notion that there are some things you can control, some things you can't. They take it almost to an extreme, to a point where you're going to be like, oh, Stoics think you can't control that and you can't control that. And they're very serious about the things you can't control. Don't even think about them. Like, just shut them out of your head, because you can't control it. Why are you using this mind space on all these things you can't control? So I have a couple of quotes from Epictetus. Do you remember who Epictetus was?
He was the former slave.
A former slave. What does his name mean?
Acquired.
Yes.
Acquired?
His name means acquired.
Acquired. Yeah. So he became free and then became a philosopher. Or he probably was a philosopher first.
Wow. What's a philosopher?
Yeah. An unemployed person. Just kidding.
Yeah, no.
I mean, maybe. No offense to any philosophers out there.
Yeah.
We think you're awesome.
Yeah. Philosophers that's a very small group. Most people are students of philosophy.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Once you call yourself a philosopher, you're no longer a philosopher.
I was going to say even most philosophers would call themselves students of philosophy. Okay. So some things you can control, right? Some things you can't. So here's this first quote by Epictetus, slave who became a philosopher. I have to die. If it is now, well, then I die now. If later, then now I'm going to eat lunch, since lunch has arrived. And dying, I'll tend to later. So I talked about Epictetus writing is among my favorite Stoic writing, because that's the way he talks. He's like, I'm going to die, but since I'm not dying right now, it's lunchtime, I'm going to eat. Right? I mean, it's a very clear way, very stark way of carrying these ideas.
Well, it sounds very pragmatic.
It is, yes.
Right? Like to me, when I hear that, I hear this is a very pragmatic approach. Like, I am going to attend to what is directly in front of me at the moment. But I'm gonna ask the question, what was Epictetus thinking when it came to retirement?
We're going to get there.
Oh,
I
good.
promise. I know.
Well,
know.
I mean,
know.
you asked the question, and it's like, oh, well, yes, if I am going to die now, then so be it.
Well,
but if I'm going to die
yes.
later, then I'm going to have lunch now. But there is some time in
Yes.
between that you ought to think about.
Yes. So okay.
Like dinner.
All right, that's fair. Okay,
Like dinner.
that's fair. All right, so let's. What would Epictetus probably have to say about philosophy? I mean, retirement. Well, he would say first off, retirement's, for most people, is way down the road.
Yep.
It's not something that you can directly affect. It's something you can directly affect, right?
I don't know.
But he would say there are things you can indirectly affect, right? There are some things you have control over, some things you don't. I mean, you may never get to retirement.
True.
If I die, if it's time to die.
Right. Then I'll really wish I would have had a good lunch rather than just the egg sandwich.
That's also very true. And so the advice would be focus not on retirement, but focus on the things that are going to enrich your life and also set you up in the future. Now, you might be like, "Oh, Tyson, you're splitting hairs. You're saying the same thing."
I have no hairs to split, Tyson. I have no hairs to split.
Think about retirement, but honestly, what he would say is the habits that are going to create for you a good retirement. The habits are what you focus on, not the retirement. You don't think about the retirement. You think about those habits that are going to get you there.
Okay.
Actually, I'm going to bring in now the second quote from Epictetus that I brought with me today. Some things are within our power, while others are not. Within our power are opinion, motivation, desire, in a word, whatever is our own doing. Not within our power are our body, our property, our reputation, and in a word, whatever is not our own doing. So just pause there for 1 second. The things that he lists that are not in his control or not in his power: his body, his property, his reputation, whatever is not our own doing. What is your first? I want to hear what your first interpretation. I don't think you've heard that quote before. What's your first interpretation?
It is a bit antithetical to the American dream.
Okay.
And probably in a good way. I just mean, like, it's a good. I was surprised to hear. I guess in some ways I was arguing, well, there's parts about body that could be under my control. Not all of them. Mm-hmm. There's parts about property that can be under my control, but not all of them. There are parts about reputation that I'd like to put under my control, but I can't necessarily. So there are things that you can affect. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's an interesting one, because I think we most often think of those things as
absolutely
ours.
Being in our control,
well,
right?
or at least our possession, right?
Right.
We possess them, and therefore we feel like we can and should exercise some form of control over those things.
So let's take the first one, body.
Yep.
All right. So here's a way to think about it. You can't control what your body necessarily. I mean, you could have some pre-existing conditions. I had prostate cancer a few years ago. I don't think there's anything I could have done to prevent it. There are things going on in your body that you absolutely can't control. You can control what you eat. You can control how much you exercise. You can control overeating, over drinking, or binging too often. I think binging sometimes is absolutely necessary. You can control.
That's when you get rid of your reason on purpose.
You can control how much you worry. When you worry, you create a stress hormone, cortisol, in your body. And if you worry a lot about your health, you're going to actually stress yourself out more. It's actually healthier not to worry about your health.
I believe that and agree with that.
So when he says that you can't control your body, you're ultimately not in control of your body, but you can build habits. You can do things that will influence the situation, but you can't stress over, am I going to have a heart attack tomorrow?
So I know this is a podcast about finance and philosophy, but philosophy in the way of being, here's a question though. I mean, because I think you look around the U.S. and mental health is a big deal, right? And so when you're talking about don't worry about these things, and then there's like anxieties and all these other, how did a Stoic? I mean, because here's the thing, I tend to believe that life in ancient Greece, kind of on the whole, from a health, financial, everything else, I tend to believe was a bit more difficult than the average life in America. I'm not saying every life in ancient Greece. It's not a one-to-one, but on average, there were a lot more dangers that existed in ancient Greece than in modern, say, American life. And yet you had these deep philosophers who would walk around and explain, you don't have to, if these are things that you are not in control of, here's how you get out of worrying about them. So what would the Stoics say to how do you stop worrying about some of those things?
Well, I think, or my take would be that it's, and we mentioned this either last week or the week before, about habits. And so if I get into a habitual routine of eating more health, I mean, we'll just stick with the body for now. Eating healthier. If I get into a routine of maybe meditating, if I get into a routine where I'm making better choices, well, I'm naturally going to worry less. But your point is taken. You can't just say to someone, stop worrying. I mean, don't think about white rabbits, right? That what you can't, like, you can't force yourself not to.
I got 100% of a brown rabbit.
Okay, not a white one. You have no idea of what a white rabbit.
Nope.
Okay.
Stop it, Alice.
You're amazing.
Stop it, Alice.
You're amazing. So
I'm late.
It's not necessarily that that it's a switch we can turn off. But do you recall one of the virtues was temperance, and this idea that not to let our emotions overtake us, and not letting our emotions overtake us is a habit. Like, we're going to lose. Like, sometimes we're going to totally get angry or overly emotional about something. We're not going to be right all the time, but we can practice it. And the more we practice it, we're going to get better at it. Yeah. So I don't think it's just don't worry, be happy. I think it's, hey, let's try to worry a little bit less every day, and we'll going to build that muscle up a little bit. And by doing that, we're going to find that if we worry less, we worry less.
Okay, I'm tracking. So if body, you can't worry about your body, or
you're not ultimately in control.
You're not in control. So you can worry about it, but a lot of good that'll do you. In fact, it'll make it worse.
It could, yes.
We're not medical doctors.
How much you, right.
I feel you.
Your body's going to give out on you.
I know. It's sad.
It's going to fail you one day.
You are not
in control.
Stop saying that.
But I want to pick up on the other one, like reputation. Because I think of reputation, because you mentioned this when we first talked about this dichotomy of control thing. I'm in control of my reputation. No, you're not, because by definition, reputation is what somebody else thinks about you. You're not in control of their brain. They're in control of their brain. Well, is as much control as anything.
They're capable of reasoning, whether they're using it or not as a whole.
So your reputation, you can do everything in the world to make your reputation good. But ultimately, by definition, reputation is what does somebody else think about me, and I can't worry about that. I can present to the world the person that I think I want to be. Yep. But I ultimately cannot control what somebody else thinks of me. And so I don't, and remember what this dichotomy control thing, it's in your life, if you can control something, think about it. Quote unquote, worry about it. Do something about it. If you cannot control it, do not let it take up space in your brain. That's what we're talking about here. Yeah. It's since I can't control the weather, don't get upset about rain on your vacation. Since I can't control what someone thinks about me, all I can do is be the person that I want to be. If they don't think about me the way I want them to be, in fact, I shouldn't even have a want in that regard, right? It's don't let it occupy yourself.
Well, take that into the context of like a work, like a job or something, or maybe in a sense of taking some time to consider deeper on if your job is not what you want it to be, right? Well, you have some degree of control and you have some degree that you can't control. If your boss doesn't think highly of you or is not encouraging you or you're not getting a raise, like there's some parts of that you can control and there's other things you can't. And so when you stress about that, right? Like, and I'd love to kind of get a take on this as we start to wrap up. One of the nice things about financial independence, right? Looking for FI or FIRE, financially independent, retire early, kind of this idea is you do kind of put more of those things in your own control bucket. So the more that you're able to put some certain parts of your life into your own control bucket, the less you have to worry about those things that are outside of your control. So the reputation you have with your boss, your level of worry changes when you have the ability to be financially independent, say, as opposed to beholden to the job. And there's a balance that there's going to be worry that comes with I have to perform and I have to do my job and I have to accomplish what I need to accomplish.
Yes, yes. But the point is you worry about doing your job well. You don't worry about what your boss thinks about your job. Let's get back to Fi since this is a Fi podcast. You can invest in the market. You cannot control the market.
Right.
Do not get upset when the market tanks because you can't control it.
Yeah.
You can, the best thing to do when the market tanks is to put more money in the market because that's when you're going to make your money, right? It's this idea, this emotional detachment from the things you cannot control. If you can truly do that, especially when it comes to investing, not giving investment advice.
Thank you for that caveat.
Yeah, sure. But if you can do that in regards to investing, you're going to do better. There's a direct stoical influence in becoming financially independent is don't let the market stress you. Do what the right thing is from an investment perspective because you want to buy when the market's down. That's when you're going to make money. So I wanted to bring one more metaphor into the conversation. How close are we on time?
We've got a few minutes.
We got a few minutes. All right, real quick. So this metaphor drives it home for a lot of people. The metaphor of the archer, and this is very common in Stoic thought. So there's an archer. Now the archer can control the quality of his bow. That his I don't even know what the
arrow.
line.
It's called the arrow. The shaft.
He can control his shaft. He can control the feather, the flight. I don't know, the darts are called flights, or the feathers, the fletching. Oh my God, you're good.
Yes.
He can control.
Quiz me on.
He can control his posture. He can control his draw. Man, you are real. You should. Man, you're.
Man, look at that.
And then he can control when he releases. The moment he releases that arrow, he has how much control? Zero. He can't worry about where the arrow goes. That sounds weird, right?
Until after he lets it go.
After he lets it go.
Fair enough.
All he can do is worry about everything that leads up to the moment where he releases. The second he releases, it should be out of his mind, out of his brain. It's out of his control. He don't worry. If he hits a target, doesn't hit the target, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
But what if he's in an archery competition?
Whether he hits it or not, he cannot control it. It's not something he's worried about. What he should worry about is the next time when he picks up his new arrow and his draw and his posture and everything else, because that's what's going to lead him to success, not worrying about the previous arrow.
On that note, don't worry about what's come before. It's out of your control. Worry about where you're headed in the future. We're going to talk next week, deep dive into financial independence, good habits, and things to do that'll kind of give you, if you're interested, a more stoic mindset on your financial independence journey. I'm Andrew. This is Tyson. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.